Hey everybody, we're going to get started real soon. Get your questions ready.
Mr. Worldwide, Miami, T-Pain, Tally, Sean Paul, Jamaica, Ludacris, ATL. Now let's show the whole world how we get down. Remix, die.
Oh yeah, shorty, what's happening? Girl, let's get this thing crackin'. You just bend it on over. Now we get behind and you can get windin'.
Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, 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 bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, 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 bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, 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 bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang, bang.
Shake, 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 senora. Shake it left and right, right. Work, 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 senora. Right into my right.
Mr. Worldwide, I pop up and greet her. Pump, Peter, pumpkin eater. With no religion, make them believers. I always hit two. Call me Jeter. Sean Paul, Payne, Pitbull, and Luda. We about bread, paper, and moolah. Mommy right there, gives great medulla. Once catch a dash, catch me in Cuba. Señorita, shake, la dejo mojadita like the Great Lakes. Mal hablado, y fresco, dame duro, mami, da lo merezco.
Oh yeah, shorty, what's happening? Girl, let's get this thing crackin'. You just bend it on over. Now we get behind and you can get windin'.
Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, 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 bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang, bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine.
Shake, 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 senora. Shake it left and right, right. Work, 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 senora. Right into my right.
Luda, hey mamacita, tú es muy bonita. Hotter than lava, shake it like two maracas. Bend down and touch your toes and hop inside these custom rolls. 2 shots of tequila, manos pa' arriba. Now bring it back, bring it till you put it right inside my lap. Make it clap, drop it low, the mommies call me Papa Dough. Too much dough, too much cash, I can't think straight with all this ass. I gotta lighten up like Sammy Sosa and live la vida loca.
Hey, shorty, what's happening? Girl, let's get this thing crackin'. You just bend it on over. Now we get behind and you can get windin'.
Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine. Bang, bang. Jump in the line, shake your body on mine.
Shake, 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 senora. Shake it left and right, right. Work, 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 senora. Right into my right.
Girl, cause you got the kind of pain I send. Girl, you on the house of paying a rent. Girl, Gyal, you own the man, no argument. Gyal, you are go win the tournament. Gyal, me want see you move and set the trend. Gyal, wind up your body and take to them. Gyal, me want see you bubble and set the trend. Gyal, wind up your body and take to them. Call him body thing when I bother with that. Straight up party, we taking chance. Shake it in our baby, got back. Tell all of my friend them she a top notch.
Oh yeah, shorty, what's happening? Girl, let's get this thing crackin'. You just bend it on over. I will get behind and you can get windin'.
Jump in the line, shake your body on
Badang, bang, bang, badang, bang, badang, bang.
Jump in the line, shake your body on mine.
Badang, 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 bang.
Jump in the line, shake your body on
Badang, bang, bang, badang, bang, badang, bang.
Jump in the line, shake your body on
Bang, 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 badang, badang, bang.
Shake, 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 senora. Shake it left and right, right. Work, 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 senora. Right into my right.
My girl got a big old booty. Yeah. Your girl got a little booty. Oh no. My girl got a big old booty. Yeah. Your girl got a little booty. Oh no. My girl got a big old booty. Yeah. Your girl got a little booty. Oh no. My girl got a big old booty. Yeah. Your girl got a little booty.
Shake, 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 senora. Shake it left and right, right. Work, 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 senora. Right into my right.
Give it to me, dame, mama. I like that, dale, mama. Give it to me, dame, mama. Badang, bang, bang, badang, bang, badang, bang. Give it to me, dame, mama. I like that, dale, mama. What we tell them, say? Give it to me, dame, mama. Bang, 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 badang, badang, dang.
Yo, move out the way. We got Missy Elliott coming through here.
That is Missy Elliott. She lost a lot of weight. I heard she eat one cracker a day.
Whoa, girl, well, I heard the bitch was married to Tim and started from with Trina.
Well, I heard the bitch got hit by 3 zebras and a monkey. I can't stand the bitch nowhere.
When I walk up in the piece, I ain't got any speed. I'm a bad man, my jumper got duggy. Y'all people ain't got it like me. I ain't studying these crows. Need to talk what you know. Stop talking about who I'm sticking and licking, just mad it ain't chose. I know y'all pull, y'all broke. Y'all job just hanging up close. Step to me, get burnt like toast. Y'all suckers, adios amigos. Post, close. I don't brag, I mostly boast. From the VA to the LA coast. Is it go? Music kills our skills on kills, I kills, I kills on kills, I. My kisser. Is a kisser. Is a kisser. When I put up in my whip, y'all be like, who that is? I'm driving, I'm gliding, I'm sliding. Y'all keep talking about that she is. I'm gripping these curves. Skirt, did you heard? Hot leathers, my feathers, my fur. I fly like a bird. Chicken heads on the ground. Who you trying to f now? Now you ain't getting loud. Better calm down before I smack it to the ground. I need my drum, bass, hi-hats. I need my snare, strings, horn. Yes, I need my Tim sound. Right, left. Is it, look at here. Music kills our skills on kills, I kills, I kills on kills, I. My kisser. Is a kisser. Is a kisser. I don't go out my house shorty, you just waiting to see who I'm gonna roll up in the club with, then report that next week. Just wanna see who I am or sniffing some yo. I know by the time I'm finished this line, I'ma hear this on the radio.
Okay. Once upon a time in College Park, where they live life fast and they scared of dark. There was a little by the name of Creek. Nobody paid him any mind, no one gave a shit. No one he could rap, no one lit the hand. So he went about his business and devised a plan. Made a CD, then he hit the block. 50,000 sold, $7 a pop. Oh, the foe, 3 years later, stepped out the swamp with 10.5 gators. Now all around the world on the microphone, he leave the booth smelling like Burberry cologne. Still riding chrome, got bitches in the kitchen, never home alone. And he's on the grind. Please let me know if he's on your mind. And respect you'll give me. Ludacris, I live loud like Timber. Had to clear these rumors. I got a headache and it's not a tumor. Get up on my lap, keep my head tucked tight. Spray so I never let the bed bugs bite. I'm hard to the core to the right. You jump down, turn around, pick up hella cotton.
My kisser. Is a kisser. Is a kisser.
Yo, straight up, Missy killed that shit tonight for real.
I know. I don't really care about her being pregnant by Michael Jackson.
No. You know what we should do? We should go get her album when it come out. We should go. Hi, Missy. Hi, Missy. What's up, fools? You think I ain't know y'all broke Milli Vanilli, JJ Fair wannabes ain't over here gossiping about me? Yo, how about you buff these Pumas for 20 cents so your lights won't get cut off? Your soggy breast, cow stomachs. Yo, take them Baby Gap shirts off, too. You just mad cause Payless ran out of plastic pumps for the after party. Yo, by the way, go get my album.
Damn.
Music kills our sales on bills, I bills, I bills, I with bills, I. My kids are.
Peace up, A-Town down. Yeah. Okay.
She know how it is. I saw the shorty, she was checking up on me. From the game, she was spitting in my ear. You would think that she knew me. Decided to cheat. Conversation got heavy. She had me feeling like she's ready to blow.
Watch out!
She's saying, come get me. So I got up and followed her to the floor. She said, baby, let's go. When I told her, I said, yeah. So they got down and said, come and get me. Yeah. I got so caught up, forgot she told me. Her and my girl used to be the best of me. Next thing I knew, she was all up on me screaming. So she's all up in my head now. Got me thinking that it might be a good idea to take her with me. She's ready to leave.
Well, let's go!
But I gotta keep it real now. Cause on the 1 to 10, she's a certified 20. But that just ain't me. Hey! Cause I don't know. I take that chance, she swears it's gonna leave. But what I do know is the way she dance makes Shawty alright for me. The way she gets low, I'm like, yeah, just work that out for me. She asked for one more dance, and I'm like, yeah, how the hell am I supposed to leave? And I said, yeah. So they got down and said, come and get me. Yeah. I got so caught up, forgot she told me. Her and my girl used to be the best of me. Next thing I knew, she was all up on me. I got the feeling. Baby, I got the feeling. You don't know what to do to me. Leave my heart heavy, down in misery. Hey, all right. Ow! Hey, ah! Cut off. The feeling. All right. Baby, 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 baby. I got the feeling, baby. Baby. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. I'm a rattle down a level with the ground. Baby, I said level with the ground. Ah, baby, you treat me bad. Nah, don't, I know. No, you don't mean it now. Sometimes
How's everybody
I'm
doing?
home,
I know.
but I'll be coming back home.
You're sitting at home, not quite sure
Sometime
what
I
you're
seem
supposed to
be
do,
fly.
wondering how did we get here? Right? How did we get here? All three of you eager to know the answer. Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. Thanks for showing up. If you've never been to one of my shows, if you've never tuned into one of my shows, this is usually an adult, free speech-oriented constitutional rights type deal where I may drop an occasional adult word. We're adults here, right? And so gather around, do what you need to do. I'm drinking water. You should drink water, or a little tonic water, maybe with some lime. I don't want any of you all to worry out there that you needed to dress up for this occasion. The truth is, and I don't mind sharing, I'm actually in my pajamas, and I decided just to, put on a shirt and a coat for you because I love you. I do. And that's why I'm doing this show. Hold on a second. We have a live breaking news here. CDC says we can declare cause of death as corona without having to wait for a test. That just in. I'm gonna have to figure out how to keep up with these things. So, all of you out there that are sending me messages, let me know if you want me to say it at that time. But the news for doctors is any doctor out there can now declare somebody's cause of death to be from corona without actually having a coronavirus test. I'm going to have to do something about these messages actually coming in through the system here. We'll just close that. We'll close. I'm going to silence my cell phones for y'all, but you don't have to silence yours. This isn't one of those deals. I'll check messages from time to time here. All right, so where are we? We're sitting at home under various stay-at-home orders, and this is where it gets tricky. Okay, dependent upon the language of the order, you may actually be required to stay at home or just encouraged to stay at home. It's an interesting difference, isn't it? Also, with the order that you have, you may want to read in there, it says you have to stay at home except for essential services or essential not just essential services, but for essential items, right? So you need to go to the store to get dog food for your dog. That can be considered essential because you're protecting life of your dog, right? So, yeah. Or food for yourself. But going to the store to get a rubber band to make a test boat in the pool may not be considered essential unless you actually say something along the lines of it's essential for a homeschool project that is required to be completed. And now we can start to make arguments that just about anything is essential. Isn't that something? If everything is essential, then there's arguments that nothing is not essential, and so why do we have any argument that maybe our constitutional rights are being violated? Of force or enforcement upon you, restricting your movements or your life, liberty, pursuit of happiness in any way is a violation of your constitutional rights. And that's just all there is to it. Now, there's a question of whether or not we've given the government the power to make those exceptions that says at certain points in time we will give up those constitutional rights because of reason X, Y, Z for a duration of X days or X period of time. But for it to go on ad infinitum and without proper authority, violation of your constitutional rights. For those that can hear the clicking in the background, the dogs have decided that they want to join in on a conversation because they heard the words dog food. Didn't you? Yeah. No, I'm not going to feed you right now. So, for the viewers that may or may not be up on your that may not be up on your civics class. The question is, where do these constitutional rights come from? How do I have them to begin with, and how are they being stopped or violated? Right. So let's explore that. Going live producing it. I'm one-man live producer here with dog assistance. So when the country was formed, we did this little thing called the Declaration of Independence, and then we wrote this Constitution that was government of the people, by the people, for the people. So what we decided is our inherent freedoms of our own, we gave those freedoms to the government to rule us under certain circumstances. And some of those circumstances were, and very basic, and a lot of people call this cheesy, but is that there was supposed to be the ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, right? And the government's not supposed to restrict you being able to do that under certain circumstances. So since the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we have explicitly had to state that certain rights needed to exist that you may not have considered back with the original Bill of Rights, because as time went on, we decided that we wanted rights guaranteed to people. So, for example, the women's right to vote had to be written as an amendment to the Constitution. We really shouldn't have had to do that if we just interpreted the Constitution and to include the women's ability to vote, but we do those things, which means legislators and governments like to pass laws to make them sound like they're worth something. And this is one of those times where governments, instead of passing laws, have instead issued executive orders without any legislation behind it, and relying on pre-existing legislation in order to support it. So let's break governments down into their multiple pieces. And if you didn't know, I'm going to tell you now, and if you're in the United States and you're a citizen, you are a citizen of the United States first, and then a citizen in the state in which you live. So all of your federal rights exist first before your state rights exist. And that's important, okay? So under federal rights, there are certain powers that are limited, granted, and controlled by the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. So there's been a question of whether or not President Trump could declare an executive order telling people to stay home. And the answer is no, he can't. I'm sure there's somebody else that would argue that he could, but because we've had a wonderful series of cases through the civil rights movement that said that Congress, and Congress alone, has the ability to regulate commerce. Regulating commerce also includes the right to travel and whether or not a business has to close or not, etc. That power falls solely with Congress, not the president. Okay, so Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the right to do that. That power doesn't lie within the president. Now here's the trick. States themselves, the several states and territories, also have their own sovereign ability, so long as their authority does not conflict with federal power. And this is where it gets dicey. Almost every state in the Union has a statute granting emergency power to the various levels of government, whether that be at the governor, county level, municipalities, etc., to be able to declare emergencies in order to restrict movement. And this all came based on two components. The first component was natural disasters. There's been a storm, there's been an earthquake, we're going to restrict travel in and out of this area because there's a disaster here and we need to keep, and as soon as everything's normal, you can come in and out of here again. And the other power for restricting movement within the United States, granted to the states, was considered under kind of militia law. If there's an invasion of some sort, then a governor or a municipality can say, you don't get to come in here because we're protecting us from a threat, right? And that threat was some guy with a gun trying to invade. Global pandemic was really not considered under those powers, under those emergency powers statutes that grant counties, governors, and local municipalities the ability to restrict travel. Now, some states have a underlying health statute that allows you to quarantine certain areas if there is a threat of disease, right? But unfortunately, those statutes are ambiguous as to what level of infection has to be determined before that power can be put in place. All of this gets muddied, doesn't it? So, what are your thoughts? What do you think? There was a question that came in from Adela of whether or not I was going to discuss martial law. And I will get to martial law here in a second. I just want to take a moment, pause, and consider, after this first 15 minutes of kind of chewy civics class, if we understand the difference between national power and where that lies versus state and local government power and where that lies, and that when it comes to restricting your ability to move, the states have more power in them than the federal government does. And you're seeing that, right? Certain places have fines that they've put in place if you violate their rules. Certain places haven't. It's a wide smattering of enforcement, if any enforcement at all. Something that's been an interesting byproduct of this, and let me know if you guys can hear me or not, or if I need to turn up my microphone. Just shoot me a quick message. One of the side effects here is the shaming of people publicly that want to enforce their constitutional rights. How did that become something, you know? How did it become okay to tell someone that they should give up their constitutional rights, carte blanche, because it's for the greater good? And to not say that I need to keep my constitutional rights. When did that become okay? Sorry, had to move the headset plug. I was getting a weird echo. I mean, in this cancel culture that we've had these last couple of years, anybody that speaks out against the collective is instantly labeled a moron or is shamed into some form of quiet status, because to speak any differently than the mob politic is somehow equates you as being a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter, or you're evil or you're not evil, or you're a moron or not a moron, or you're a criminal or not a criminal. The idea of exchange of ideas and the exchange of counter-opposing ideas in times of crisis or struggle is long rooted in the First Amendment to be able to have a discussion about these things without fear of retribution. Right? Yet anybody that talks about preserving constitutional rights is in fear of retribution. So, before I go on to talk about the Texas abortion case that is in an interesting status, I want to answer Adela's question about martial law. So, in times of emergency, certain powers will try to declare martial law. That martial law means that all rights of person are suspended, rights of habeas corpus, rights of representation, rights to due process. All of these things get suspended during this time of martial law because there's a problem or some form of problem that, and this is the key, martial law is required when the civil court systems have failed to maintain their infrastructure such that remedy is not available through the courts. Now, if you think about the our system of government here in the United States, and thanks for tuning in Finland, nice to see you. Our system here relies on the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. And the executive branch and the judicial branch are much more aligned with enforcement and interpretive laws. There's never really been a case where the legislative branch, other than in rare circumstances, actually executes the laws. So if your court system fails, martial law comes in. So this is the trick. This becomes the poison pill, if you will. Let's say there's so many quarantined workers or quarantined parties that the courts are no longer able to function. If the courts can't function because the executives have quarantined everyone, then the executive there at that point in time could declare martial law based on a scenario that executive created themselves. That's kind of scary, right? To think that maybe an unintended consequence of these stay-at-home orders is that it cripples the court systems. And so if you have a crippled court system, then martial law can come into play. I'd be very surprised if martial law comes into play at all within the coronavirus environment, at least here in the United States, simply because there is no evidence that the court system is unable to operate. There are multiple court instructions that allow courts to continue to operate and handle cases either remotely, by phone, or some other measure. So, yeah, I don't think we have to worry about that. Now, we've been going for about, 20 minutes now. What I want to do is give you guys a chance to take a short break, refresh your beverage, think of a question, tell your friends this is going on, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes. It's the I'm Not Your Lawyer show. I'm Jason.
Keep on learning. Soldiers, keep on moving. Whoa, keep on turning. 'Cause it won't be too long. Keep on lying. preachers keep on preaching. Words keep on turning. Doesn't bother me too long. How long? Lovers keep on loving. Believers keep on believing. Sleepers just stop sleeping. 'Cause it won't be too long. I'm so glad that he let me try it again. 'Cause my last time on earth I lived the whole world of sin. I'm so glad that I know more than I knew then. Gonna keep on trying till I reach my highest ground. Till I reach my highest ground. No one's gonna bring me down. Oh no. Till I reach my highest ground. Don't you let nobody bring you down. They'll show no fight. God is gonna show you.
Hey, my friends, feel as they're appointed duty. Oh, they keep trying to tell me all you want to do is use me. Hey, but my answer. They don't want let to use me stuff. Hey, and I wanna spread the news that if it feels it's a good getting used, oh, you just keep on using me. Hey, until you use me up.
Yep.
Hey, until you using me up.
Sometimes music just has a way of
Hey,
saying
my
things,
big
doesn't it?
brother.
All right. Where were we? Yes. We're going to talk about the latest case that came out in Texas. It's in two different phases right now, and I'm going to try to pull it up here for you to view while I'm reviewing it. Give me just 1 second. I have to warn you, this is going to get political. And I want you to know I'm not taking a position for or against abortion. But in a very interesting case here in Texas to preserve constitutional rights to seek abortion, there was a case filed in Texas stating that the restriction on elective procedures is a violation of constitutional rights. And the right to seek those. So here's what you have is you have somebody standing up for their constitutional rights against a ban to have elective surgery that's based on abortion rights. And this has got a lot of people, at least in the legal world, that are Democrat and Republican, basically saying, well done, right? Well done. Because you have, on the one hand, on the far right, people are saying you can't restrict my ability to go to church. It's a constitutionally protected right. And the lead case that will establish that for them is the constitutional right to get an abortion. And so people that are against abortion are now cheering for a pro-abortion case in federal court in Texas. I just, the beauty of that double-edged sword is fantastic to me from a constitutional rights perspective. And yeah, so anyway, last week, federal judge in Texas appointed by a Republican stated that the ban on elective procedures is unconstitutional based on abortion rights. And now the present status of that case is that got suspended by the Court of Appeals in the Fifth Circuit. And so now that ban is back in place. This is an interesting fight from a legal perspective, don't you think? There's got to be somebody that can comment on that. There's got to be somebody that, with the seven of us here, what are your thoughts on how that one case getting national attention is got people on the far right shaking their head, going, yeah, I want my constitutional rights, but only mine. But wait, if I support this case, now I'm supporting abortion, which I don't. See, that's the thing about constitutional rights, is constitutional rights are rights for everyone all the time, not just your group, not just, not just your rights, but everybody's rights. Now, Adela asked me to break down Roe v. Wade. Again, I'm not for or against abortion in this. This is just the law. This is how it works. So a lot of people think that Roe v. Wade is based on the right to an abortion, and that's not actually the legal justification why Roe v. Wade exists. Roe v. Wade exists because a previous case it's called Connecticut v. Griswold, sought to shoot down a state law that was being challenged as unconstitutional because that state law was prohibiting the use of contraceptive devices in the home. And a woman came before the court and said, "Are you kidding me? How are you going to enforce this? Who are you to invade my right to privacy? I have a constitutional right to privacy in my home. And my right to privacy in my home means that you don't get to determine whether or not I'm using a condom or not. And by the way, Judge, how are you going to enforce that? Are you going to put people at the bedroom window examining prior, to coitus whether or not a contraceptive is being used?" Apparently, the dogs are upset. Excuse me. Hey, can you give me a minute? Sorry about that. So, that law then said, or that outcome of that court case, the judge said, "You're right, this is a stupid law. We're not going to enforce it. It's unconstitutional, violation of your right to privacy." So, in Roe versus Wade, a single woman stepped forward and said, "Wait a minute, if you're going to declare that a married woman has a right to privacy in her home and in her body and in herself and what's going on, then that right extends to a single woman and my person and my body and what I'm doing. And if that right is an equal right for my privacy, then you don't get to tell me what I do with my body." And the court agreed that right to privacy extended. So you had an equal protection claim that the right to privacy extended in both married women and single women to have a right of expectation and privacy in their bodies. Okay, that's where we're at. So now we advance forward. Governor of Texas and state municipalities ordered that no non-essential surgical procedures could be carried out. The dogs are apparently well aware that this is a hot button topic. Give me just 1 second. I'm gonna fix the dogs' issues here, and I'll be right back. Sorry about this.
That's a housewife coming at you. Wait a minute, man. That's a nail or two. Coming at him. Can't see in the hoop. Go get him. Ow. Give me. Ow. Wait a minute. I want them to get up, get that thing.
Sorry about that.
Get up, take that thing. Dance the thing. Say it. Get up, take that
The dogs will never allow another dog to pass out front of the house without objection. Is what it is. So, that's Roe v. Wade. That's how that law was broken down. Individuals' right to privacy in their home can't be disturbed. And that was for a married woman. Roe v. Wade came along and said a married woman and a single woman should have the same rights under equal protection. And so now that applies to all women. So elective procedures are suspended because they don't want unnecessary burden on the medical system during the corona outbreak. I don't see how the operation of an abortion clinic interferes with response to coronavirus. I don't see how that happens. However, that was being enforced, and somebody challenged that. How's it going to end up? I don't know. But it's really intriguing. The intriguing part of it is that the championship fight for individual rights is being fought for the right to privacy and the right to do things that you want to do that are constitutionally protected. So let's look at, just for example, Galveston County. For those of you out there in the U.S. that aren't aware, Galveston County's judge declared a stay-at-home order, and in his exceptions wrote very specifically that all constitutionally protected activities are accepted from the stay-at-home order, which, by the way, you could drive a Mack truck through that stay-at-home order. It's a poison pill. And, you know, the previous week, the judge said that he would never issue a stay-at-home order because he didn't think that they were constitutional. Writing on the wall is that he was under pressure that a different statute in Texas would be enacted by a non-elected official that would have declared quarantines based on a medical statute. So the judge decided to do it under his own statutes in order to prevent even worse statute from going in place. So I hear there's a lot of beeping going on right now. I'm gonna check some questions here and see what's going on. Interesting. A friend of mine is letting me know that while watching the show, he's enjoying vodka tonic with quinine. Excellent. And I've also had a request to turn up my mic, so I'm gonna do that. Give me just 1 second here. Hopefully that's a little better. I have to apologize. My throat's a little sore. Some of you may know that I've been having my own little bout with coronavirus this week, and I'm on the uptick. I'm coming out of it. So, but my voice has been a little scratchy from the sore throat and from everything that goes along with that. So where do we go from here? Let's examine the different statutes and how they apply. And let me see if I can get this get at least the local Texas statute pulled up here. Some of you may know that about a week and a half ago, I was considering filing an action here in Texas against the city of League City for an unconstitutional restriction on travel based on, the wording of their emergency ordinance. And the difficulty with that is that bringing an action against a city in times like this are incredibly unpopular because people at the end of the day just want you to stay home, want everybody to stay home so that they themselves don't get sick or somebody they know don't get sick. The statute I'm going to be reviewing here, if you want to follow along, is Texas 418. And the specific statute that the local governments used to Texas 418 is a statute that local governments used in order to establish that they could restrict your movements, right? So, I'm trying to pull this up for you guys. See if I can find the... Yep. It's going to take me a moment. Thanks for being patient. Mm-hmm. All right, here it is. Terrible television, I know, but I'm not a entertainer. So, the Texas Constitution gives the Texas legislation the ability to enact laws, and in doing so grants power to the executive branch, and then the legislature can also grant power to local municipalities as well as the governor in order to enforce the statute. Okay? So 418.108, Declaration of Local Disaster. And this is where this law, as I said from our first discussion, our first segment, is designed to really handle public disasters, hurricanes, oil spills, some form of invasion, etc. And never contemplated this type of action. So. Specifically here under, who has the ability to declare a disaster. It says the presiding officer of the governing body of a political subdivision may declare a local state of disaster. All right, they can't declare a statewide disaster. That's reserved for the governor. But each individual municipality from county level on down has the ability to declare their own local state of disaster. County judge or the mayor of a municipality may order the evacuation of all or part of the population from a stricken or threatened area until the jurisdiction and authority of the county judge or mayor, if the county judge or mayor considers the action necessary for the preservation of life or other disaster mitigation response. And here's the subsection that they're all relying on, and this is subsection G. The county judge or the mayor of a municipality may control ingress to and egress from a disaster area under the jurisdiction and authority of the county judge or mayor and control the movement of persons and the occupancy of premises in that area. Yeah, a county judge or a mayor can tell you to sit your ass at home and not move during a declaration of a disaster. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When did we give up our constitutional rights as U.S. citizens? When did we give up our national rights, our freedom of movement, our freedom of commerce, our freedom of life and liberty in the pursuit of happiness? When did we agree to give a local mayor the ability to strip us of our constitutional rights? I don't recall doing that, and I don't think that's the intent of these statutes, but that's how they're being used. And the argument against that is, well, it's for the greater good to prevent the spread of a virus, right? Is that so important? Well, sure, it's important. We don't want people to get sick. But there needs to be thresholds, I would think. One case of confirmed coronavirus in a county, I don't think is sufficient to be able to strip everybody in that county of their right to make a living or to go where they please. I don't think one is sufficient. 0 obviously isn't sufficient. But there is a number, I think, a percentage of the population, if affected, could grant that authority to restrict movement, and it's not being considered. And the reason it's not considered, for what an obvious person would say, is that, well, we don't have the tests. We don't have the tests to know how many people actually have it, and we don't have the data to be able to determine if you do have it and you survive it, are you now going to go and infect other people, or can you be infected, or how will it work? And so we're dealing with a whole bunch of I don't know in these circumstances that along with panic and fear and everything else that goes with it, have apparently made it okay to strip us of our rights. We willingly give them up out of fear. So in times of local statute or custom conflicting with a national right, there have been multiple instances where that has been shot down. The civil rights cases and the restriction on certain persons being able to eat in certain establishments was overruled, local statutes overruled by the federal courts under the Commerce Clause, because that was determined that Congress is the only one that can determine what commerce is and isn't allowed, and that under the Commerce Clause, if you restrict somebody's ability to do business or visit those businesses, you are restricting their right to travel. So it was a combined right to travel and Commerce Clause argument that preserved civil rights in the 60s and got rid of Jim Crow laws. So now we give all that up. Nobody can do anything out of fear. Yeah, I know. We went from 7 viewers down to 4. This is really interesting stuff. And it's not the normal comedy show that I do, and I apologize for that. But it's something to really think about. Well, I'm going to take one short break. Try to get your questions in if you have them. If you're just joining us, welcome. We're talking about giving up your constitutionally guaranteed rights out of fear. and why that is frowned upon if you combat that by anybody else that wants to shame you into not talking about it because it's not for the greater good. The majority of times when people give up their constitutional rights willingly for the greater good is in times of when a dictator or socialism or some other thing comes along and says, well, for everybody's benefit, we're all going to just give up whatever our rights are, and we're just going to do what the government tells us to do. That's not the United States. New Jersey is restricting gun sales, not directly. They're restricting gun sales because they don't want people buying guns to protect themselves. So instead of declaring that nobody gets to buy a gun, what do? They shut off their background checks for people to be able to go through background checks in order to purchase a gun legally. Well, awesome. Thanks. Now you have police that are specifically stating that they are not going to go out and approach petty theft crime or anything along those lines, and you restrict the ability of the people to protect themselves by not allowing them to buy guns. So it's a field day for the criminals because theft, robbery, the cops don't care. And it's a field day against you at home because you don't get to purchase a gun to protect yourself from violent crime. Yeah. In fact, going out and buying a gun may not be considered an essential service or product that you need, and so your attempt to do that may be enforced against you. In League City, it would be a $2,000 fine and up to 180 days in jail. Yeah. I'm sure we all saw in the news the Tampa pastor that held a church service in person at his church. Is that good or bad? Let's think about that. Next break coming up. Get your glass of wine refreshed. Yeah.
You say you'll be down in 5. The smell of your perfume.
Rihanna's Pandora station is pumping out the hits today.
I know that I'll be a mess the second that I see you. You won't be surprised. It happens every time. It's nothing new. It's always on a night like tonight. I thank God you can read my mind. 'Cause when you look at me with those eyes, I'm speechless, staring at you standing there in that dress. What it's doing to me ain't a secret, 'cause watching you is all that I can do. And I'm speechless. You already know that you're my weakness. After all this time I'm just as nervous every time you walk into the room. I'm speechless. It started when you said hello, just did something to me. And I've been in a daze ever since the day that we met. You took the breath out of my lungs, can't even fight it. And all of the words out of my mouth without even trying. And I'm speechless, staring at you standing there in that dress. What it's doing to me ain't a secret, 'cause watching you is all that I can do. And I'm speechless. You already know that you're my weakness. After all this time I'm just as nervous every time you walk into the room. I'm speechless. Yeah, baby. you can read my mind. 'Cause when you look at me with those eyes, I'm speechless. You're standing there in that dress. Girl, it ain't a secret. 'Cause watching you is all that I can do. I'm speechless. You already know that you're my weakness. After all this time, I'm just as nervous every time you walk into the room. I'm speechless. Oh, you know it, babe.
First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head. I'm fired up and tired of the way that things have been. Oh, ooh, the way that things have been. Oh, ooh. Second thing, second, don't you tell me what you think that I can be. I'm the one at the sail, I'm the master of my sea. Oh, ooh, the master of my sea. Oh, I was broken from a young age, taking my soak into the masses, writing my poems for the few that look at me, took to me, shook at me, feeling me, singing from heartache, from the pain, taking my message from the veins, speaking my lesson from the brain, seeing the beauty through the. Hey, you made me a believer, believer. Hey, you break me down, you made me a believer, believer.
So, next topic. The church in Tampa Bay. Let's pull up the news article on that. This was interesting. This entire congregation and the pastor were shunned, and I think, and we'll confirm with the story, that the pastor was fined and then bailed out. Let's get this pulled up for you here. You can follow along. Here we go. Pastor of Tampa Church that held 2 large Sunday services arrested and jailed. Pastor Rodney Howard Brown of the River at Tampa Bay Church was booked into local jail on Monday on charges of unlawful assembly and violating Hillsborough County's stay-at-home order. He posted bail 30 minutes later. Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous tip that the pastor planned to hold services Sunday in violation of the county orders, asking residents to stay at home and limit gatherings to slow the coronavirus. Sheriff's officials said they warned church lawyers on Friday and Sunday about the dangerous environment they were creating for their members and the community. But Howard Brown, the self-proclaimed Holy Ghost bartender and COVID-19 conspiracy theorist, ignored these warnings. He held 2 large services on Sunday, deputies said, and even bussed people into the church. The church live streamed the morning main event service on its Facebook page, showing congregants shoulder to shoulder while the church band played. Okay, so did he violate the order? Yeah, he did. He did. Does the local authority have the ability to usurp, the First Amendment? It's the First Amendment. For those of you that are not familiar with the language of the First Amendment, let me help you out. Here is the Constitution. Here's all the sections. Here's all the articles. It's a long document. Amendments, the Bill of Rights. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedoms of speech or of the press the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievance. Okay, so that's the federal government can't do that, right? So, in breaking this down, the federal government doesn't get to make those laws. Well, how does that apply to state governments? Well, it's called the Supremacy Clause. Do you know what the Supremacy Clause is? Supremacy Clause says that no state shall make a law supreme to that of the national government. That's it. It's that simple. States don't have the ability to usurp the rights of the citizens of the United States. Was the church peaceably assembled? Yeah. They got a rock band playing. They're swaying back and forth. It's their choice to do so. So why weren't members of the congregation fined and put in jail? They violated the order. Seems like it's a political statement, right? Well, I'll leave you with this thought, okay? And I want you to think about this. If you're sitting in your chair and you think that the Texas order that gives the constitutional right for somebody to seek an abortion should be protected, you also have to believe that the right to assemble at a church should be protected. Everybody's rights should be protected. It's that simple. That's how it works. Yeah. With that, I'm going to say goodnight. I wish you all well. Try not to upset the apple cart too much. I'm not your lawyer. I'm not telling you to go out. But if you do, and you get a ticket, and you want to fight it, look me up. I might just do that for you.
I can't believe that it's real. The way that you made me feel. I'm burning deep down inside. A love that I cannot hide. I know it's you and me, baby. That make the world go round. call you for a helping hand. I know you'll do the best you can, but it don't take much for me before my cup runs over. All this love inside me, I believe there's going to be an explosion. Yeah, you talk to me, oh baby, I'm in no hurry. Yeah, but tell me all your troubles. Yeah, and you won't ever have to worry now. But one more thing, you just can't trust everybody. Everybody you see, no, no,